نحمدہ و نصلی علی رسول الکریم بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم۔ آج سے تقریباً 18-19 سال قبل جب 11 ستمبر کا واقعہ ہوا تھا تو پوری دنیا افغانستان کے اوپر چڑھ دوڑی تھی، اور اس دوران دنیا کو علم ہوا کہ برطانیہ کے ایک صحافی ایوان رڈلی جو ہے وہ وہاں پر موجود ہے اور وہ طالبان کی قید میں ہے، اور حملے سے پہلے یہ کوشش تھی کہ اس کو کسی نہ کسی طریقے سے رہا کرایا جائے، لیکن طالبان نے خود ہی انہیں چھوڑ دیا، اور ایک رات تقریباً 9 بجے 10 بجے کے قریب اندھیرے میں تورخم کے بارڈر کے اوپر سرچ لائٹس لگی ہوئی تھیں جب وہ خاتون ایوان رڈلی وہاں پر پہنچی۔ تمام ویسٹرن اور لوکل میڈیا صرف ایک سوال پوچھ رہا تھا کہ طالبان کا آپ کے ساتھ رویہ کیسا تھا؟ تو اس نے کہا کرٹیس اینڈ کلچرڈ، اور اس کے بعد میڈیا کے چہرے پر ہوائیاں اڑنے لگ گئیں۔ وہ خاتون جہاں سے چلی گئیں انگلینڈ پہنچیں، اور انہوں نے وہاں پر جا کر اسلام قبول کر لیا اور اپنا نام مریم رڈلی رکھا۔ یہ وہی خاتون ہے جس نے عافیہ صدیقی کے لیے مہم چلائی۔ اس خاتون نے کہا کہ میں جن لوگوں کی قید میں رہی ہوں وہ اس دنیا کے لوگ نہیں لگتے۔ وہ زمرد جیسی سبز آنکھیں اور کالے بال اور خوبصورت لمبے قد والے جوان تھے کہ جن کو دیکھ کر یورپ کی کوئی بھی خاتون اپنا دل ہار جائے۔ میرے سامنے ایسے نظریں جھکائے پھرتے تھے کہ جیسے وہ میرے کوئی مجرم ہوں۔ یہ کس دنیا کے لوگ ہیں کہ جب بمباری ہو رہی ہوتی تھی اور اس کے باوجود بھی اللہ کے سامنے سرسجود ہوتے تھے، اور جن کو کھانا اگر کم بھی ملتا تھا تو مجھے زیادہ کھلاتے تھے۔ ایسا ہی ایک اور واقعہ آج کے اس دور میں 19 سال کے بعد پھر ہوا ہے۔ ایک شخص جو 3 سال افغان طالبان کی قید میں رہا، آسٹریلیا کا ٹیموتھی ویکس، جو کہ وہاں امریکن یونیورسٹی کابل میں پڑھانے گیا تھا، اور پھر اس کے بعد وہ اپنی کہانی بیان کرتے ہوئے کہتا ہے کہ 3 سال کی لمبی قید اور اس کے اندر دنیا بھر سے مایوسی کے دوران انہیں طالبان کے رویے اور اسلام کی حقانیت نے اسلام قبول کرنے پر آمادہ کیا، اور وہ جیل میں ہی مسلمان ہو گیا۔ اور پھر اس کے بعد آسٹریلیا جا کے اس نے اس بات کا اعلان کیا، اور اس ٹیموتھی ویکس کا نام جبرائیل عمر بر ہے۔ آج وہ آسٹریلیا سے ہمارے ساتھ موجود ہیں۔ ویلکم مسٹر جبرائیل عمر ٹو دا نیو ٹیلی ویژن شو۔ السلام علیکم۔
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
MashaAllah.
It's a pleasure tonight, sir.
Mr. Jibril, you have been in the captivity of Taliban for about 3 years. It started in August 2016 and you were released in a swap on August, I think, 2019. So may I know the entire ordeal? Will you please tell the entire story to us?
I was taken in 2016 from Kabul.
Mm-hmm.
From Kabul, we were taken over the mountains and into Pakistan, where we were held in various locations throughout Pakistan and Afghanistan across the approximately 3.5 years that I was kept with the Taliban. We were moved continually throughout this time. In fact, 33 times we were moved. We were kept in windowless cells. My hands and wrists were chained 24 hours a day. And we were in very basic prison conditions.
How you come to know that you are in Pakistan? Because the entire terrain is completely identical.
I believe that we're in Pakistan because we were driving on the left-hand side of the road, and we were driving in cars which were manufactured for the left-hand side of the road. At times, we also received medical and other equipment which had receipts or printed out numbers that identified the goods as coming from areas such as Quetta and Chaman. I also believe this is according to what the guards told me during my time in captivity, and as to what I have been told by the various intelligence agencies since my release.
I've seen your video in which the Taliban has released your video, first video, which was released in January 2017, and you were quite distressed and you lost the hope at the moment. And in the second video, you were better. So what happened in between January and June?
So what happened to many people around the world is we become desensitized to the conditions that we are kept in. At the beginning, of course, it was an incredible shock. The abduction itself and the possibility that we were to be executed. However, after some time, I began to make friends with my guards, and I began to see them as human beings. And not only to see them as human beings, but human beings who were very pious, who were compassionate, who were kind. I'm not saying that all of the members that I interacted with during my time in captivity were as such, but the majority of those that I interacted with had a great effect on me, and they lessened the harsh reality of my captivity.
So you said one time that a time came when you became Muslim and it gave you strength during your imprisonment. And
Great.
And yes. How you came to know about the teachings of Islam and how you came near to that? Did the Taliban did so or something else?
I have worked overseas for approximately 15 years of my life, and during that time I have worked in several Islamic countries, including United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia. I was in Palestine during the Second Intifada, so I'm not a stranger to the teachings of Islam. Living or being kept in captivity by my guards across that time period, I had very close and personal exposure to people who lived their lives according to their understanding of the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And as I said, I was motivated in part by the profound faith that I found amongst my guards. I was also motivated by myself and the feeling of gratitude that I had and needed to express. And as one of the only freedoms that was allowed to me during my time in captivity was religious freedom, I chose to accept Islam.
So what type of attitude Taliban had before you were you were not a convert to Islam, and later on when you were converted? Before that, did there any change you found in the Taliban's attitude?
I will say truthfully that they did not encourage me at any point to become a Muslim, that they did not force me. In fact, it was the complete opposite, which I have until this day been perplexed about. I do not know why they decided that it was not a good idea for me to accept Islam at that time, but the decision was my own to make, and they never forced it upon me. But in the same way, they never really believed that I was a true Muslim. So it was a slight, was a little bit of a, I would say, unusual situation. I struggled to understand it. I didn't know why they didn't accept me as a Muslim. So, and until this day, I suppose I won't know until I sit down and speak with the guards who had me at that time.
You said once time that people started talking about your psychological health, and they talked about this. You have developed the Stockholm syndrome, and some people said that you are a Taliban puppet, or you are in some other ordeal, psychological ordeal. Do you think that you have been, because you are a learned person, you have read a lot, you read Islam, and you have been teaching at the university level, at master's level, you have been teaching. Do you think that any sort of psychological infatuation you developed with your hostages?
I wouldn't call it a psychological infatuation. In fact, I wouldn't call it an infatuation. It was a friendship that I have with certain members of the Guards. When I left, I felt sad. At the same time, I was incredibly happy, but I felt sad because I was going back to a world where I knew I would be safe, that I could wake up every morning and my life would not be at risk. Mm-hmm. However, I do not have Stockholm syndrome. I am not a puppet of the Taliban, and many people do not understand the things that I have gone through both during my captivity and since my release. I have had a great amount of challenges in terms of my health. I was diagnosed with cancer. I've had 7 operations. Mm-hmm. In the last 8 months, I've had 2 months of radiotherapy. I went through 3.5 years of hell. Mm-hmm. But despite all of that, I felt a connection with these people because I saw them living their day-to-day lives. I didn't see them as soldiers. I saw them as pious Muslims. They got up in the morning, they prayed, they conducted themselves daily in accordance to what I believe was the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the teachings of the Holy Quran. And I was actually lost for words when I saw these people of such great faith, because we don't see it in Western society these days.
During your captivity, sorry, please carry on.
These were ordinary people. These weren't commanders. These were young men, the majority of which came from rural areas, with very limited access to education, and also had lived very difficult lives. They have spent their whole lives growing up in a war zone, and yet they were still compassionate to me. And in addition to that, they had a good sense of humour, which I found something that was really surprising. And I find this in the Afghan people themselves, that they have an incredible sense of humour and they have an incredible outlook on life.
19 years ago, the British journalist Yvonne Ridley, actually she was under the captivity of Taliban and released right after 9/11 incident. And when she reached the Torkham border, the media asked what was the attitude of Taliban towards her, and she said 2 words: compassionate and graceful. What type of your experience was with your captors?
I believe, well, I know that these men treated me with compassion and mercy. However, I was kept in a cell in very remote areas and for a long period of time. So a cell is still a cell. It is still prison. And it was a very difficult time for me. As you said, a lot of people say that I have Stockholm Syndrome or that I am a puppet of the Taliban. But if I had Stockholm Syndrome or I was a puppet of the Taliban, would I be admitting to the fact that they beat me badly? That at times I felt that they weren't following the Sunnah of the Prophet. You know, I am not just lauding them with praise, but I recognize their strength struggle for an independent Afghanistan, I never ever support the use of violence. I never support the use of violence. But I do support the struggle for Afghan people's independence and for their right to determine what they want to do in their own country.
True. During these 3 years, there have been lots of periods when you have lost the hope. But can you remember any time in which you thought that something is going to happen good for you and you developed a ray of the hope in your captivity period?
I never lost hope.
Never.
Not
You
even
never lost the
for
hope.
one day.
You never lost the hope.
Never.
That's excellent.
And I
So,
think in that sort of situation that it is dangerous. It is very dangerous to lose hope.
did you practice Islam during your this 1 year's period in Taliban's captivity, but saying prayers or reading Quran?
I did. I said prayers 5 times a day in unison with my guards who would pray outside the room. And I read what literature was available to us. It actually all came from Pakistan. All of our literature had big stamps on the book that said Lahore Market. So I was very grateful for those books. I read a lot about the Sahabat and about the reasons for the revelation of the Quran. And when your life has been filled with books, I was very grateful to have them at that time in captivity. Although we only had them for a limited time, and I did have to ask for quite a long while before we got them.
So you were in the captivity, but the people like us who were outside were living, they were having a lot of news because the Daesh or ISS was butchering the people in Iraq, and there was a lot of fear. That's why Obama didn't disclose, even the coalition forces didn't disclose your abduction in Kabul University. So when you came out of the prison, when you came out of the captivity, and you must have read all these newspapers and stories around, what feeling you developed?
Actually, when I got out of captivity,
when you got out of the prison and you came to know what was happening outside,
I tried to avoid a lot of the reports that were going on in the media because all of them had that horrible picture of me and Kevin side by side. And I looked like some sort of criminal or somebody who'd been living in the streets. So I wasn't really interested in reading them. I have started to look back from them with time, but coming out of captivity, it was more important for me to speak to my family and my friends than to look at media reports.
Mm-hmm. People talk a lot about Imran Khan's role in your release. Do you think so?
There were many people who played roles, and I have given thanks right from the outset to all of these people. I know that your president, Imran Khan, played a great role as he continues to play a great role. Being an Australian and I have a slightly different impression of Imran Khan because I grew up watching him play cricket. So he was a familiar figure to me. So I was very grateful for the role that he plays, and also grateful for the role that he continues to play in supporting the inter-Afghan talks and the negotiations that were held in Doha on the 28th, with the lead up to the signing of the agreement on the 28th of February.
Mr. Imran, we are going to have a break, and we'll be back with you after a few minutes. नाज़रीन, आपके इंतज़ार का बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। हमारे दरमियान आज इस वक्त मौजूद हैं ऑस्ट्रेलियन प्रोफेसर टिमोथी वीक्स, जो कि तालिबान की कैद में थे और इस दौरान उन्होंने इस्लाम कबूल कर लिया और उन्होंने अपना नाम जिब्राइल उमर रखा है। हमने एक लंबी गुफ्तगू कर चुके हैं उनके साथ। अब उनसे और उनकी सारी जो तालिबान का उनकी ज़िंदगी जो अगवा के दौरान थी और रिहाई तक, अब उनसे पूछते हैं कि उनके मज़ीद आके क्या मामलात हैं और क्या प्लान्स हैं। Welcome back, Mr. Jibril. What type of religious books you have been reading during your captivity, and what is your plans now to do?
I'm doing a lot of reading at the moment because I'm writing my book. I have a book contract, so I'll be working on that over the next 6 months to get that completed, and it's going to tell the story of my time in captivity.
So you have not been an alien to the Islamic teachings, because you told you that you have been posted somewhere in Muslim countries and you have been teaching there also, and you have a contact with the Muslim societies. So what type of, do you know Arabic that you read Quran, or you use some translation to read the Quran?
I can read it slowly. I can read the prayers. So I learned it while I was in captivity. And unfortunately, due to my illness, I haven't had a lot of time to devote. But I do what I can. At the moment, I'm trying to teach myself some basic ayats, like Ayat al-Kursi, and I have some very good Pashtun friends here in Australia, and they are helping me also with both my Arabic and my Pashtun.
During the periods of the distress, which portion of Quran or which ayat you do read, and it gives you solace and comfort and a spirit to fight?
Yes, I remember in particular that there is one that says that Allah never gives us a burden that we cannot bear.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's excellent.
So,
can you read it? Can you read it in Arabic? And have you any ayat which you have actually taken by heart, and you remember it?
I know. Yes, of course. That one I don't know in Arabic, but of course I know the very often recited ayat Qul huwallahu ahad.
So what are your future plans of studying Islam? And I've heard that you are fighting the illness of cancer at the moment also, and it also gives you more strength when you are more close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and when you are more close in the spiritual world. So what are you doing at the moment? What's your routine at the moment?
As everywhere in the world, we are quite impacted by COVID at the moment. So our mosques are only open for very short periods of time for prayers. But as I may have mentioned earlier, I go to our local mosque, which alhamdulillah is only 4 blocks away. I go there twice a day to pray. And if I'm unable to do that, I always have a carer with me, and they are Islamic, so we pray together. I am trying to do some studies. I was meeting on a regular basis with the Imam, who is actually from Karachi. So he is a lovely, lovely person, and he was helping me with my Islamic studies. But unfortunately, the second wave of COVID hit Australia, and as well with my illness, I have to be very, very careful because I have a very low immune system due to the cancer.
You have seen both sides of Afghanistan. You have been teaching in Kabul, and you know, and the Kabul administration, the administration which has been established by the Americans over there, and you know their style of governance, and even the position over there in the Kabul street. And you have been very close with Taliban for about 3 years. What do you think the future of Afghanistan would be?
Future of Afghanistan, that's a very interesting question. I don't think anybody, only Allah knows what the future of Afghanistan will bring, but the only way that a future can be achieved for the people of Afghanistan is through negotiation, and negotiation must include all parties. All parties must have a voice in the future of Afghanistan, and I hope that the people of Afghanistan can work together, and that includes all of the people, the Tajik, the Uzbek, the Pashtun, the Farsi-speaking people, all of them must come to an agreement, because 40 years of fighting has brought no peace to the country, and it will just continue bringing atrocities. So the only way forward is through negotiation.
Recently, you must have come across with the news and Joe Biden when he said that we are going to revisit the agreement between Taliban and the United States, and then even will say we will see what's going to happen in the next coming days. Taliban are going to abide by the agreement they had with the United States of America and their role vis-a-vis the Afghan government. Do you think that any change will happen?
In the last couple of days, we have seen some indications of what the Biden administration will follow in terms of policy. And I think at this very, very early stage that it is looking positive. And the latest positive step is that they have continued to endorse Zalmay Khalilzad as the special representative in these talks. So Khalilzad has been working tirelessly in his efforts to bring peace to the people of Afghanistan, and by bringing these parties together. And I think the new Biden administration's support for Khalilzad does give us an indication that they do intend to continue with the plan of military withdrawal and supporting inter-Afghan talks.
You must have come across in Afghanistan that people of Afghanistan, they actually love the Islamic way of life, and anything which is imposed on them, whether it is the Western lifestyle, whether it is some values which you can say the universal and established by the modern way of life, do you think that by imposition of such values or such lifestyle will disturb the Afghan people?
I think that the imposition of any foreign culture on Afghanistan will have a great effect on its people. The Pashtun culture in particular is a very, I'm trying to think of a suitable word for it. It's traditional. It is, it's very family orientated. They are a people who show great hospitality. I am often left wordless by the actions of my Pashtun friends here in Australia who are living as refugees within this country, and I will go out for lunch with them and they will not allow me to pay for a single thing. So I think that the Pashtun cultures, the Hazara cultures, the Uzbek, Afghanistan is very much like Australia. It's made up of a great melting pot of cultures, and I think all of these cultures need to have the opportunity to be preserved. Cultures do change over time, but that needs to be done in an organic process and not force-fed upon a people.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Ibrahim. It's a pleasure to be with you and to have you as our guest. You are the most honored person as far as any person living on the globe, any Muslim living on the globe. You fought a big war against all odds for 3 years, and then you became near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. नाज़रीन, आज हमारे दरमियान एक ऐसी शख्सियत मौजूद थी कि जिन्हें 2016 में तालिबान ने अगवा किया और फिर वो उनके पास उनकी कैद में 3 साल तक रहे। इस दौरान बहुत कुछ बीता। वो जेल में थे और दुनिया पे एक बिल्कुल मुख्तलिफ किस्म की सूरत हाल चली आ रही थी। दाइश लोगों के गले काट रही थी और यहाँ तक कि उस ज़माने में उस बरतानवी जर्नलिस्ट को बुरी तरह कत्ल किया गया था और एक खौफ का आलम था। یہ خوف اگرچہ کہ وہاں اندر نہیں تھا، لیکن ان کے ساتھ نیگوشیٹ کرنے والے، گفتگو کرنے والوں کے دلوں میں یہ تھا کہ ایک نہ دن کسی نہ کسی طور پہ یہ ہوگا۔ یہ شخص جس کی گفتگو آپ نے سنی، اس کو طالبان کی قید کے دوران ان کے رویے، ان کی سادگی اور اس کے حسن سلوک نے اسلام کے قریب کیا، اور اس کے ساتھ ساتھ انہوں نے دیکھا کہ جب وہ اسلام کے قریب آئے تو انہوں نے اس بقیہ 1.5 سال کے اندر اپنے آپ کو ایک مختلف انسان پایا اور ایک ایسا شخص پایا جس نے ان کو ہمت دی اس وقت کو گزارنے کے لیے۔ آج جو ہمارے درمیان موجود تھے، یہ بتاتا ہے کہ مسلمانوں کی 1400 سال سے لے کے آج تک اپنے قیدیوں کے ساتھ، ان لوگوں کے ساتھ کہ جو ان کے زیر سایہ یا ان کی نگرانی میں آ جائیں، ان کا حسن سلوک کیسا ہوتا ہے۔ اور یہی وہ حسن سلوک تھا کہ جب مسلمان اس پر قائم تھے تو پوری دنیا میں انہیں کسی شخص کو اسلام لانے کے لیے، اسلام قبول کرنے کے لیے مجبور نہیں کرنا پڑتا تھا۔ اجازت دیجیے، اللہ نے کے بعد۔